Hello. Every Sunday, the residents of Facemount wake up in a different world, and that's not a metaphor. Overnight, familiar faces turn into featureless masks, and old friends become unrecognizable strangers. Here, it's impossible to recognize even yourself, let alone your neighbors. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I'm really curious to see where everyone is joining from. Now, settle in and get cozy. We're about to begin. You arrive in the village of Facemount with little fanfare, which is entirely as it should be, in a place where the primary pastime is watching turnips grow, and the chief excitement is the weekly arrival of the cheese merchant, who is usually late. The village is the kind of place that in every age manages to avoid greatness and scandal with an almost studied mediocrity. It is neither prosperous nor poor, neither famous nor infamous. The wooden houses, thatched with care but little pride, sag quietly along the single muddy road, their roofs drooping like tired eyebrows. You are not sure why you came. Perhaps you were running from something, though it is just as likely you were running to something, or simply running in a circle. No one asks. The villagers of Facemount are admirably incurious, a trait that makes them difficult to offend and nearly impossible to impress. There are, however, peculiarities, subtle ones, the kind that only a truly dull village can sustain without comment. You notice them in small details, like the way people hesitate for half a heartbeat before addressing one another, or the fact that no one ever mentions anyone else's appearance. Not once does anyone exclaim over a new haircut, a handsome beard, or a particularly ghastly wart. It is not that they lack opinions. Everyone, everywhere, has opinions, but that expressing them seems both forbidden and pointless. It is only after several days, when you have become used to the silent, foggy mornings and the ever present scent of boiled cabbage, that you overhear the baker mutter something to the blacksmith as he hands over a lump of bread. Well, at least it is not Sunday, he says. The blacksmith grunts. No, thank the saints for that. You, naturally, are curious, though you are careful not to look too curious. The innkeeper, a woman with arms like hams and a voice like a cracked church bell, answers your unspoken question with a shrug. It is always the same here, she says, polishing a mug that may once have been clean. But Sundays are special. She does not elaborate. She does not need to. You will find out soon enough. And so you pass your first week in Facemount, slowly sinking into its rhythm. Mornings begin with the ringing of the same bell every day, precisely 2 hours after sunrise. The peasants shuffle out to the fields. The tradesmen grumble at their benches. Children, who are largely indistinguishable from small mud statues, chase each other through the village square. Everyone knows everyone else's business, which is to say, everyone knows that there is no business to know. By Friday, you have almost forgotten the baker's words. By Saturday, you remember them again as a kind of prickle in the back of your mind. And then, inevitably, Sunday arrives. You wake to a village transformed, but not in the way you expected. The morning is perfectly ordinary. There is no fog, no ominous music. The bell rings at the usual hour. Yet when you step outside, you notice a change so subtle you cannot quite put your finger on it. People are moving slower. Their faces are set in a particular blankness, as if they are trying very hard to remember a song they once knew. You watch as two neighbors pass each other in the lane. They pause, stare at one another, and then move on, each with a faint frown of confusion. You realize, with a jolt, that you are not sure who they were, even though you have seen both of them every day that week. Their features, nose, mouth, eyes, all seem to blur together, sliding around like oil on water. You glance down at your own hands, half expecting them to be different, but they are reassuringly familiar, pale, a little dirty, with a scar on the knuckle from childhood. But when you glance into the polished brass plate that passes for a mirror at the inn, your reflection seems oddly indistinct. Your face is still your own, probably, but something is off, and you cannot say what. By noon, the confusion is palpable. People are stopping to greet each other, and the conversations are stilted. Ah, good day, neighbor, says one, and to you, replies the other, after a hesitation just slightly too long. Children argue over who is whose sibling. The blacksmith tries to sell a horseshoe to a man who might be the miller or might be the miller's cousin. The baker delivers bread to the wrong cottage, and the woman who answers the door blinks in surprise, as if she cannot quite decide whether the loaf is hers. No one panics. This, you gather, is normal, at least as normal as anything is in face mount. You try to catch someone's eye, to ask a question, but everyone is too busy peering at one another with cautious uncertainty. The day drifts by in a haze. By evening, people retreat to their homes, some laughing, others muttering, but none admitting outright that anything is wrong. You lie in bed, staring at the rough beams above, and wonder what you have stumbled into. Outside, the village settles into silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. Tomorrow, you suspect, things will return to normal, but you are not certain what normal is anymore. Perhaps in face mount, there is no such thing. Sunday in face mount, as you are about to learn, is not a day of rest. At least, not the restful kind prescribed in scriptures or whispered about by dreamy philosophers. Here, Sunday is a day of confusion, an organized and well rehearsed confusion, if such a thing can exist. You wake, as on any other day, to the sound of the bell, but there is an extra note in the air. The village seems to hold its breath. The birds, unbothered, sing as usual. The sun is polite, neither too bright nor too gloomy, as if not wanting to draw attention to itself. But the people, oh, the people are different. It begins at breakfast. You come down to the common room of the inn and find that the long table, normally a sight of grumbling and the occasional forced cheerfulness, is unusually subdued. The innkeeper, who yesterday called you dear, in the manner of one who cannot remember your name, now says nothing at all. She places a bowl of gruel in front of you and stares for a moment, her gaze unfocused. Thank you, you offer tentatively. She nods, but it is clear she does not know who you are. You notice the other guests, the merchant with his battered hat, the widow with the ever present knitting, are suffering the same fate. None of them look quite themselves. In fact, you are not sure if the widow is the widow or someone else entirely. Her hands, certainly, are still deft with the needles, but her face is just out of reach, as if a thin fog sits between your eyes and her features. The day moves forward, as days insist on doing. In the street, villagers mill about. You hear snatches of conversation, oddly formal. "Good morning, neighbor," says one. "Indeed it is," replies the other, after a suspiciously long pause. No one says anyone's name. Names, it seems, have become dangerous, or at the very least, unreliable. You try to speak to the blacksmith, whose massive hands and blackened apron are unmistakable, except that today they are not. You hesitate, uncertain. He eyes you with the same doubt. "Can I help you?" he asks. You nearly call him by name, but stop yourself just in time. "I was just looking," you say instead. "Of course," he replies, polite and distant. You drift through the village like a ghost. It becomes a kind of game. Who are you speaking to? The woman with the red shawl. Yesterday she gave you directions to the well, but today her face is different, her eyes dull and shifting. The group of children who run past, are they the same as before? You cannot say. The more you focus, the more the faces blur. It is not just you. The entire village is adrift. The baker, normally cheerful and chatty, stands behind his stall, hands folded, looking bewildered. A man approaches, points to a loaf, and hands over a coin. For a moment, their hands touch, and both recoil slightly, as if reminded of something uncomfortable. A horse breaks loose from its tether and trots lazily across the square. Three men chase after it, all shouting, none calling it by name. If the horse has a name, no one can remember it. The scene would be funny if it were not so sad. Or perhaps it is funny because it is so sad. You are not sure anymore. By midday, a rhythm emerges. People begin to rely on habits and routines. They buy the same bread as always, eat the same porridge, drink the same thin ale. Some mutter to themselves as if reciting a list. The blacksmith lives in the first house after the square. The baker is across from the well. The miller's wife always wears blue. But these facts offer little comfort. Faces are not so easily pinned down by memory or logic. You wander to the edge of the village and find the shepherdess, her flock grazing nearby. She does not look up as you approach, or if she does, you cannot tell. Her face is as blank as the sky. You try to make conversation. "Lovely weather," you say. She nods, not meeting your eyes. "Yes, I suppose so." "Is it always like this on Sundays?" you venture. She shrugs, or perhaps she merely adjusts her cloak. "Always, since before I was born." Some say it keeps us humble. Others say it is a curse. I think it is simply Sunday. You thank her and leave, no wiser than before. As afternoon slides into evening, the confusion only deepens. Families sit together at dinner tables, but no one laughs. The children, usually noisy and unruly, are silent. The air is thick with the effort of remembering. People call each other dear, friend, neighbor, and no one objects. To object would require certainty, and certainty is in short supply. After supper, you walk past the church where the priest is locking up. He sees you and inclines his head. You nod in return, unsure if this is the same priest you heard preach on Thursday or a different one entirely. Sleep well, he says, voice gentle. You want to ask him why this happens, but the question dies on your tongue. The strangeness of the day has worn you down. You realize you do not know the innkeeper's name, or even if you would recognize her tomorrow. Back in your room, you stare at your reflection in the brass plate. Your face is there, more or less, but there is a fleeting moment when it swims before your eyes, the features sliding into unfamiliar configurations. You blink, and the feeling passes. You lie down, exhausted by the day's peculiar emptiness. Outside, the village settles into uneasy sleep. Somewhere, an owl hoots, and you wonder if it knows the difference between one villager and another. Tomorrow, you hope, things will be normal again. But for now, you drift into sleep, haunted by faces you cannot quite remember, and a sense that Face Mount's Sundays will never be restful for you. You awaken on Monday to a world restored. It is a quiet, damp morning, the sort that would make a lesser soul pine for warmer climes, but to you it is nothing short of miraculous. The faces that eluded you all yesterday have snapped back into clarity, like ink lines returning to a faded map. The innkeeper is once again a red cheeked woman with a single bushy eyebrow. The blacksmith's nose, crooked as an ancient tree root, reclaims its place of honor. Even the children in the square are suddenly distinct. One with a missing tooth, another with a shock of orange hair that could belong to no one else. At first, you are relieved. The world is ordinary again, and the slow routine of Face Mount resumes its plodding pace. Yet beneath your relief is a new resolve. Next Sunday, you will be ready. You will recognize the villagers, come what may. You will not succumb to the general fog. The historian in you, the one who takes pride in remembering which king lost which battle and why, cannot accept defeat at the hands of a mere village custom, however mysterious. You begin your preparations in earnest. Every encounter becomes an opportunity for study. Over breakfast, you scrutinize the innkeeper's face, the deep line above her lip, the mole on her left cheek, the way her ears stick out at different angles. You ask her name, and she tells you, a little suspiciously, Marta, but everyone calls me Mistress Marta. You write this down in your notebook, along with a quick sketch, just a few lines and a note. Forehead wide, chin sharp, always wears blue apron. When the cheese merchant arrives, punctual for once, you seize the moment. He is a thin, shifty man with a nervous smile and a habit of touching his ear whenever he speaks. Jonas, he says, but folks here call me Cheese Jonas. Into the notebook he goes. You fill page after page. Blacksmith Peter, nose broken twice, right thumb missing nail. Baker Anya, voice high, left eyebrow splits in two. Priest Father Mark, white hair, walks with limp. It is, you must admit, a little obsessive, but there is a joy in this detective work, a sense that you are finally peeling back the layers of the village's dullness to find something sharp beneath. In the evenings, you sit in your tiny room and review your notes, testing yourself. Who is the miller's wife? Which child wears a green scarf? You quiz yourself until your eyes blur. You even attempt drawings. The results are not encouraging. Every sketch turns out roughly the same, as if your pencil refuses to betray the secret of face mount. Still, you persist. You add details, hoping that the sheer weight of observation will anchor each face in your memory. The villagers, for their part, regard your efforts with a mix of amusement and suspicion. Some think you are writing a book. They are half right. Others whisper that you are spying for the Lord in the next county. They are entirely wrong. The children are bolder. Draw me, they cry, crowding around with sticky fingers and grubby faces. You do, and for a moment, everyone laughs. Laughter, you note, sounds the same, no matter whose face you cannot see. As the week drags on, your anticipation grows. You rehearse scenarios, meeting the blacksmith at the well, greeting Mistress Marta at breakfast, identifying Cheese Jonas by his nervous ear touching. You imagine outwitting the Sunday fog, being the only one in the village who knows who is who. There is a delicious arrogance in your hope. Surely, with enough preparation, you will be immune. Saturday night arrives with a pale moon and a drizzle that slicks the rooftops. You review your notebook one last time, repeating names and features until you are sure you could identify each villager in your sleep. The village is quiet, as if everyone is bracing themselves for what is to come. That night, your dreams are a jumbled procession of faces, some real, some invented, melting and reforming with every turn. The priest's limp becomes the baker's. The blacksmith's crooked nose migrates to the innkeeper, and children swap hair colors with alarming speed. You awake unsettled, but determined. Sunday dawns. The bell rings. You wash your face, put on your boots, and clutch your notebook like a shield. Downstairs, Mistress Marta is serving breakfast. Her voice is familiar, her apron blue. You glance at your notes, wide forehead, sharp chin, but when you look up, her features shimmer and slide, refusing to be pinned down. She smiles, but it is a smile without context. You force yourself to focus. Good morning, Mistress Marta, you say, deliberately. But even as the words leave your mouth, doubt creeps in. Is this Marta or someone else? Her hands are the right shape, but her ears, did they always stick out so much? Is that mole new? You squint, willing her face to resolve itself, but the harder you look, the less you see. You step outside. The cheese merchant, Jonas, you remind yourself, stands by his cart. You watch for the telltale ear touch, but when he speaks, his hand goes nowhere near his ear. His smile is strange, crooked, almost unfamiliar. You open your notebook for confirmation, but the words seem to mock you. Thin, shifty, nervous. Thin, yes. Nervous? Perhaps. Shifty. Who can tell? The villagers pass by and your heart sinks. Features slip and slide, colors blur. Your careful descriptions float away like leaves on a stream. The children run past, a chorus of shrill voices. Which one wears green? Which one is missing a tooth you cannot say? Desperately, you approach the blacksmith. Surely, you will know him by his missing thumb. But his hands are gloved, and when he removes a glove, both thumbs are intact. He stares at you, puzzled. Something wrong? He asks, the words polite but distant. You shake your head. No, just never mind. You try Mistress Marta again, then Cheese Jonas, then the priest. Each time, your notes fail you. Even the sketches look wrong. Features out of proportion, lines wandering into nonsense. You wander the village in a fog, notebook clutched tight. But the harder you try to anchor yourself, the more you drift. By midday, you give up. You return to your room and close your notebook, defeated. As evening falls, the faces begin to sharpen once more, though not enough for comfort. You feel oddly exposed, as if the village has unmasked you in some private way. In bed, you stare at your own reflection in the brass plate, willing your face to stay put. Tomorrow, you promise yourself you will try again. But Facemount is not a place where promises matter. Not on Sundays. In Facemount, confusion is not confined to Sundays. It seeps into the week like damp through the stonework, rarely noticed, never discussed, yet always present. You, having failed in your scientific assault on Sunday's strangeness, begin to observe the subtler, more persistent confusion that colors daily life here. Monday is a day of cautious relief. The villagers move with an odd kind of satisfaction, pausing longer than usual to look at one another, as if reacquainting themselves after a long absence. Ah, Marta, says the blacksmith with something like genuine delight, his crooked nose beaming. Back to your old self. She laughs, swats him with her apron, and for a moment, the world is as it should be. Yet there is a residue, a slight hesitation in every greeting, a glance too long, a pause before a name. No one mentions what happened on Sunday. Why would they? To name it would be to invite it into the week. Instead, while resumes its monotony, as if by sheer repetition, normality might win out. But the confusion persists just below the surface. You begin to notice it in the little things. Mistress Marta, for instance, mistakes the baker for the priest, handing him a plate of bread with a half whispered, "Say a prayer for my old father, will you?" The baker accepts the bread, bows his head as solemnly as any cleric, and only later does as the real priest appear, bemused and hungry. Children, it seems, are most resilient. They swap names as easily as they swap sticks or stones. Today I am Petra, says one, tugging at your sleeve. No, you are not, cries another. Petra has red hair. I do have red hair. Not today, you do not. They laugh and run off, their faces gleefully indistinct, their identities a game that never grows old. You notice a new ritual at the well. Women gather to draw water, but before handing a bucket to one another, they pause, peering intently at faces, trying to guess who will use the water for washing and who for soup. Mistakes are frequent. The baker's wife ends up with muddy water, the shepherdess with a bucket so clean it might as well be wine. No one complains. Complaints, after all, would require certainty. At the market, barter is a delicate dance. Cheese Jonas exchanges wheels of cheese with a man who might be the miller, though he suspects it is the tanner. The deal is made, the cheese is weighed, and both men go on their way, faintly dissatisfied, but unable to say why. More than once, you witness someone return home to the wrong house, only to emerge sheepish and try another door. There is no scandal. Instead, neighbors wave, amused, and the errant villager is welcomed with mock applause. Even marriages are not immune. One evening, you hear a woman scold her husband for coming home to the wrong wife. He shrugs, apologizes, and by morning it is all forgotten. You ask Father Mark about this one evening as you walk past the church. The priest looks tired, his limp more pronounced. It is a matter of faith, I suppose, he says. The Lord knows his own, even if we do not always manage it ourselves. Some say the confusion keeps us humble. Others, here, he glances at you slyly, believe it is a punishment. I myself prefer to see it as a mercy. Imagine always knowing exactly who you are speaking to. What a burden that would be. His words linger in your mind. Is the confusion a mercy or a curse? You cannot decide. All you know is that it persists, quietly shaping the life of the village. You begin to wonder if the villagers secretly enjoy it. There is a freedom in uncertainty, after all. To mistake one neighbor for another is to shed the weight of old grudges and obligations, if only for a day. You try to join in, to let go of your obsession with names and faces. At the market, you accept bread from a woman whose name you cannot remember. In the fields, you share a joke with a man whose face is all shadows and sunlight. You find yourself laughing more easily, worrying less. But the confusion is not without cost. One afternoon, a child goes missing. The villagers search, but no one can remember who the child's parents are, or even what the child looks like. The search goes on until dusk, when the child returns, muddy and triumphant, having spent the day in the woods. There is a collective sigh of relief, but the incident is not mentioned again. At night, you lie in bed and think about the week's confusions. You remember the faces that blurred on Sunday, the names that slipped through your fingers, the laughter that filled the square. You begin to suspect that Facemount's greatest secret is not its Sunday strangeness, but its ability to survive and even thrive amidst everyday confusion. In the end, you decide that perhaps it does not matter who is who. In face mount, everyone is someone, and no one is everyone. The days roll on, steady as the river, and you drift along with them, nameless and content. Sunday, of course, is coming, but you find you are less afraid. After all, in face mount, confusion is the only certainty. As the week grinds to its expected, lumpy conclusion, you discover that even in a village where confusion is the norm, a mind like yours cannot help but seek order. If face mount is a great fog of memory and identity, then you will become its lantern, or so you tell yourself. Resistance, you decide, may be futile, but it is at least interesting. Your plan is simple. On the coming Sunday, you will not leave your room. You will remain inside the inn, behind the safety of four thick, uneven walls. If the strangeness is something in the air, perhaps it can be shut out. If it is a matter of sight, of faces blurring, names vanishing, then surely solitude is the answer. Mistress Marta, the innkeeper, seems to find this eccentric but tolerable. She brings you a breakfast of porridge and cheese, and for once does not question your decision to remain indoors. Sunday dawns, and you make a show of your preparations. You check the windows for drafts, close the shutters tight, and place your notebook on the table beside the bed. The room is small but solid. A single bed, a chair, a table, a chest for your few possessions. The brass plate that passes for a mirror is propped against the wall, dull and scratched. For good measure, you lock the door from the inside. Let the village confuse itself, you will be the exception. At first, the morning proceeds as planned. You eat your breakfast, reread your notes, and amuse yourself with memories of more sensible places. Places where people remember who they are, where confusion is a luxury reserved for the very old or the very foolish. You even permit yourself a feeling of smugness, though this is a mistake, as you will soon discover. As the hours pass, the silence grows thick. There is a little noise from below, no laughter, no voices raised in greeting or argument. You begin to wonder if you have misjudged the day. You peer out the window, careful not to be seen, and catch sight of villagers moving slowly through the square, their steps hesitant, their gestures tentative. You cannot see their faces clearly, but something about the way they move suggests uncertainty. You return to your table and try to distract yourself by reading, but the words slip away. The room feels smaller, the air heavier. You glance at the brass plate, expecting to see your own face, but the reflection is oddly vague, a suggestion of features rather than the thing itself. You blink, lean closer, and for a moment your eyes refuse to cooperate. Is that your own mouth, your own eyes? The longer you stare, the less certain you become. You look down at your hands. They are familiar, mostly, though you could not say with complete confidence which finger you broke as a child, or whether the faint scar on your palm is on the left or the right. You try to recall your own features, the shape of your nose, the set of your jaw, the color of your eyes. The answers are slow in coming. You pick up your notebook, determined to anchor yourself, but the handwriting looks strange, angular, as if someone else has made these careful notes about a village you no longer recognize. You close your eyes, take a breath, and try to remember who you are. Your name, yes, that comes easily enough. The village, the year, the reason for your visit. But when you attempt to picture your own face, it dissolves into a swirl of memories. Your father's beard, your mother's eyes, the face of a teacher from childhood, the fleeting reflection of a stranger in a rain slicked window, all blend together, refusing to settle. Outside, the village moves in its Sunday pattern, slow, uncertain, careful. You hear footsteps on the stairs, a murmur of voices, the soft creak of the inn's ancient beams. Someone knocks at your door. You freeze, unsure if you should answer. Breakfast is long gone, calls Mistress Marta's voice, but I saved you some bread. You hesitate before replying, suddenly unable to picture her face. Was her nose large, or was it her chin? You cannot recall. You stay silent, and eventually the footsteps retreat. You are alone again, but not safe. The confusion has seeped through the walls, through the locked door, through every defense you have built. It is not merely out there in the village square, it is in here with you. By late afternoon, you are desperate for distraction. You pace the room, read your notes aloud, try to hum a tune from your childhood. Every effort to impose order feels forced, hollow. You glance once more at the mirror and see only a blur, a ghost, neither familiar nor wholly foreign. You cover the mirror with a cloth. As dusk falls, you finally crack open the door and peer into the corridor. The inn is empty and silent. Downstairs, you find Mistress Marta, at least you believe it is she, tidying the tables. She glances up, her face a shifting mask, and smiles. Did you rest well? She asks. You nod, unable to meet her gaze. As well as anyone, you reply. She pats your arm. Her hand is warm and solid. For a moment, you almost recognize her, almost remember the line of her jaw or the curve of her eyebrow. But the moment passes. You eat a quiet supper in the common room, surrounded by people you know but cannot name, faces that are both strange and achingly familiar. The day ends not with triumph, but with resignation. You have resisted, and you have failed. Whatever strange power claims face mount on Sundays is not so easily outwitted. You lie in bed that night and realize that even in solitude, confusion finds you. Tomorrow, you tell yourself, things will be different, but you no longer quite believe it. In face mount, it seems, resistance is simply another way to lose yourself. In the days that follow your failed stand against Sunday's confusion, you turn your attention to the deeper, older rhythms of face mount. If you cannot resist the strangeness, perhaps you can understand it. You become a student of the village's peculiar customs, a role that suits you almost as well as the role of outsider. You begin by asking gentle questions over the breakfast table. Why does the baker never deliver on Sundays? You ask, as if the answer will be something as ordinary as a day of rest. Mistress Marta raises her eyebrow, which you are pleased to see you can distinguish again, and gives a non-committal shrug. It is not done, she says. Everyone knows that. Such is the pattern. You notice, as if for the first time, that there are things no one does on Sundays. No one visits the well, though on every other day, fetching water is as regular as breathing. No one rings the church bell, not even Father Mark, who otherwise seems to enjoy the sound. There are no public disputes, no new contracts, no weddings, no funerals. If a cow wanders into the neighbor's yard, it is left there until Monday. If a child comes home with a cut or a bruise, the remedy must wait. You try to probe these rituals with gentle irony, but the villagers resist explanation. It is tradition, says Cheese Jonas, as if tradition is a law of nature. My mother never baked bread on Sundays, and neither do I. The blacksmith, Peter, is equally vague. That is just how it is. You would not want to tempt fate. Superstition, it seems, is the invisible mortar that holds the village together. Old women hang sprigs of dried herbs over every door before sunset on Saturday. Children are forbidden to whistle indoors after dark, lest they wake the faces. You ask what that means, and the children giggle but will not say. Each household has its own charms. A penny buried beneath the doorstep, a broken comb nailed over the hearth, a piece of red string tied around the wrist. These are not the grand gestures of legend, but the small, constant habits that shape life. You notice a man draw a chalk mark above his door before dawn, only to rub it away again at noon. Just in case, he mutters. You sense that the villagers are as much comforted as constrained by these rituals. They are armor against the formless threat that hovers over every Sunday. My grandmother said the world is thinner on Sundays, whispers the baker's wife, as she kneads dough with strong, floury hands. Thinner? Thinner how? You ask. She looks away. Just thinner, like you could fall through if you are not careful. Stories and half remembered rules are everywhere. Never look too long into someone's eyes on a Sunday. Never start a journey, or you may forget where you are going. Never eat the last piece of bread. You try to catalog these in your notebook, but they multiply, slippery as eels. You notice that the villagers avoid mirrors and reflective surfaces on Sundays. The brass plate in your room is covered with a faded cloth every Saturday night by Mistress Marta, and you have adopted the habit yourself. Some say that to look at your own face on a Sunday is to lose it entirely. You remember the way your features blurred in the mirror last Sunday and decide this is not a superstition you wish to challenge again. The church, too, has its rituals. Father Mark's Sunday sermons are delivered in a strange, measured cadence, his eyes closed for much of the service. The congregation sits with heads bowed, hands clasped, not daring to look at one another. The prayers are familiar, but the faces are anonymous. We are all equal before the Lord, especially on Sundays, says Father Mark, and for once, no one argues. You try to find out if the village has always lived this way, or if the customs are a recent invention. The oldest woman in Facemount, old Mother Lyra, who is nearly blind and older than the oldest gravestone, remembers her mother and her mother's mother doing the same things. It was always thus, she says, rocking gently by the fire. There are places in the world where you must not ask questions. Face Mount is one of them. At first, you are frustrated by this fog of folklore. Your notebook is thick with rules, but none explain the why. Why here and not in the next village over? Why faces and not names? Why Sundays and not any other day? You want reasons, but the villagers want comfort. Over time, though, you come to appreciate the elegance of their system. The customs do not solve the Sunday mystery. They wrap it in layers of habit and precaution, making it survivable. No one is left alone on a Sunday, even if no one knows exactly who they are with. Meals are eaten together, not out of warmth, but out of necessity, so that no one disappears entirely. There is something almost admirable in this, the refusal to panic, the stoic acceptance, the sense of a community born from shared bewilderment. Perhaps this, more than the confusion itself, is what has allowed Face Mount to endure for so many generations. On Saturday night, you watch as the village prepares once more, doors marked, bread shared, laughter a little nervous but determined. Even you find yourself tying a bit of string around your wrist, just in case. You sleep lightly, haunted by fragments of rhyme and old wives' tales. And when Sunday dawns, you face the day not with fear or defiance, but with the calm of one who knows that customs, even strange ones, can keep the world from falling through its thinnest cracks. Curiosity, like mildew, thrives in damp places. In Face Mount, despite, or perhaps because of, its thick crust of custom, the oddest incidents seem to grow wild, especially on Sundays. You notice this not with the clinical detachment you once prized, but with the weary amusement of someone who has accepted that logic is not a currency traded here. The first of these incidents occurs just after midday, beneath a sky so blandly gray that it could have been borrowed from any village in any season. You are strolling through the square, notebook tucked firmly away. Notes you have learned are of little use on Sundays, when you spot Mistress Marta standing outside her own house, frowning at a pair of boots clutched in her hands. She turns the boots over, sniffs them, scowls. A man, tall, with a shock of dark hair, approaches, equally bewildered. Are those my boots? He asks, though his uncertainty is clear. Marta considers this, then shrugs. If you say so. She hands them over, and the man, after a moment's study, slips them on. They fit well enough, which is apparently all the confirmation required. The two exchange awkward nods and part, neither truly satisfied, neither able to protest. You watch as, over the course of the afternoon, the confusion manifests in small, comic disasters. The baker's bread, delivered with ceremony to the wrong cottage, is accepted with polite confusion. An old woman returns from the fields to find a strange man snoring in her bed. He, too, is perplexed, but not enough to move. At one point, a cluster of children appears at your side. They squinted up at you and confer among themselves. Are you the miller's cousin? One finally asks. No, you reply, with as much certainty as you can muster. That is just what the miller's cousin would say, another child counters. They giggle and dash away, intent on new misidentifications. It soon becomes apparent that mistakes are the real business of Sunday. In the marketplace, a woman you recognize by her crooked teeth insists on paying you for a basket of eggs. I do not have any eggs, you protest. You must, she replies, else why would I be giving you money? Unable to contradict the logic of the day, you accept the coin and the mystery. Later, a man who may or may not be Cheese Jonas returns the favor, offering you a hunk of cheese in exchange for directions to a house neither of you can locate. You begin to notice a pattern. Sunday confusion is not total, it is instead exquisitely precise in its randomness. Neighbors forget each other but remember shared jokes. Lovers mistake one another but recall secrets only they would know. Families eat together in silence, unsure of names, but comfortable in their shared forgetfulness. You see this most clearly at the evening meal. The inn's long table is crowded with guests, faces blurred, voices hesitant, laughter erupting at unexpected moments. Someone asks for the salt, but the request is misheard, and soon 3 different dishes are passed around, none of them containing salt. No one seems to mind. It is a kind of game, this ballet of error. Stories from previous Sundays are exchanged with a special kind of glee. One woman claims she spent an entire afternoon gossiping with her own husband, never realizing it was him until they both reached for the same cup. Another confesses that she once kissed a stranger at the well, convinced he was her betrothed. He turned out to be the priest, and he never let me forget it, she adds, to the priest's visible discomfort and the table's delight. You listen, amused and slightly envious. There is a lightness to these tales, a sense that Sunday confusion, for all its inconvenience, is a source of freedom. Old resentments vanish with identities. A wife may scold the wrong husband. A child may follow the wrong parent home. But on Monday, all is forgiven, all is forgotten. The chaos contains, if not kindness, then at least a certain gentle mercy. Yet not every incident is comic. Near dusk, you notice a man wandering the lane, brow furrowed, eyes searching every face. He pauses before each villager, asking the same question: Have you seen my daughter? No one seems to know. Faces are inspected, guesses are made, but none satisfy. The man circles the square until, by some silent miracle, a little girl with tangled hair runs up to him and takes his hand. Found you, she announces. Relief passes over the man's face, but the memory of his worry lingers with you. That night, as the village gathers by the hearth, a silence settles over the room. The mistakes of the day are shared, laughed at, then set aside. You catch yourself almost wishing for a mistake of your own, a story to add to the collection. But you remain an observer, always the guest, never quite part of the farce. You retire to your room, finding your own boots, though you check just in case, and place your notebook on the bedside table. You consider writing down the day's incidents, but something stops you. The stories, it seems, are best left floating in the thick air of the inn, where they can be mistaken, retold, and finally forgotten. You lie in bed, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and argument below. You realize, with a strange kind of peace, that confusion is not only a nuisance in face mount, but also a salve, a chance for everyone, once a week, to escape the burdens of their roles. Outside, a dog barks, or perhaps it is a fox. It is impossible to say. In face mount, on a Sunday, nothing is quite what it seems. You close your eyes and let the village's peculiar mercy wash over you. Tomorrow, you know, the incidents will become stories, and the stories will become history, and all will be as it was. Until next Sunday, when the confusion and the curious incidents will begin again. If customs are the bones of face mount, legends are its breath, restless, sometimes fragrant, sometimes foul, always thick enough to choke a question. After a time, you come to realize that the villager's Sunday confusion is not merely endured, but explained and re explained by a rich compost of stories, superstitions, and whispered recollections, all layered and compressed like the village's own history. The telling of legends is not reserved for special occasions. Instead, it is a background noise, like the wind through the rafters or the lowing of distant cattle, ever present, changing only in volume. They are recited around the hearth, retold at the market, gossiped about in the queue at the well. Children hear them before they learn to read. Adults pass them along, each embellishing a detail or omitting an inconvenience. It is during a rainy afternoon, with the fields a mess and work impossible, that you first find yourself drawn into the thick of such stories. The inn is crowded, villagers pressed close to avoid the damp. Mistress Marta, who is feeling generous or perhaps bored, fills the cups more freely, and soon the talk grows loose. The oldest tales are the ones that come out first. According to old Mother Lyra, who claims to remember a time when the sky was brighter and the river ran in a different bed, the confusion began after a quarrel with a witch. The witch, her name now lost, or perhaps purposely unspoken, was once scorned by the villagers for her strange ways. She cursed the place, declaring that on the Lord's day, not a soul would know friend from foe, neighbor from kin, until the people of Facemount learned to love without knowing who they loved. Someone snorts at this. If that is what love is, then I suppose we are saints, says the blacksmith. Laughter ripples, and the story shifts shape, as all good legends do. The next version, offered by Cheese Jonas, with the air of one who has heard it all before, is grimmer. The confusion is a ward against a nameless evil. Once, long ago, a darkness crept into the valley, a thing with many faces, or no face at all, depending on the teller. It could steal a man's name or wear a woman's likeness. To save themselves, the villagers made a bargain. Each Sunday, they would surrender their sight of one another, and in return, the darkness would pass them by. And has it, you ask, only half mocking? Are you still here to ask? Jonas replies, his tone too glib to be reassuring. Not to be outdone, the priest, Father Mark, whose voice carries even in the thickest argument, offers a third account. Perhaps, he intones, it is a test. The Lord sometimes asks us to walk in darkness, trusting not in the evidence of our eyes, but in the steadfastness of our hearts. If we stumble on Sundays, perhaps we are meant to learn a kind of humility. This is greeted with the polite silence reserved for sermons, and soon the more secular voices retake the floor. Some legends are as practical as they are fanciful. A miller recounts that the confusion was once a clever ruse invented by tax dodging ancestors to confound an overly zealous lord's census. When the collector came, nobody could tell him who lived where or who owed what. By the time he gave up, the taxes were spent on bread and ale, and Facemount celebrated with a 3-day feast. This story is popular among the drinkers, who raise their mugs and declare the confusion a blessing, whatever its cause. There are darker stories, too. More than one villager swears that on a long ago Sunday, someone disappeared, vanished as if snatched by the wind. Was it a child, a traveling tinker, a bride on the eve of her wedding? No two tellers agree, and yet the warning lingers. Do not stray too far on Sundays, or you might forget not only your neighbors, but yourself. Children, of course, delight in the most absurd stories. They whisper of faceless ghosts who roam the woods on Sunday evenings, searching for a village to call home. They dare each other to look into dark wells or under their beds, lest they glimpse their own face looking back, empty and blank. You listen, notebook in hand, though you quickly learn that writing anything down is futile. Each story mutates as soon as it is told, details shifting like the features of a villager on a Sunday morning. The one constant is the confusion itself, a mystery so familiar that the villagers have become experts at living beside it. There is a particular legend that catches your ear, told in low tones by a woman with a scar above her lip, a mark that even Sunday confusion cannot quite erase. According to her, the village once tried to break the curse. A band of young men and women stayed up all night in the church, vowing to keep their faces uncovered, their eyes wide open, no matter what came. When the sun rose, they had no memory of the night, nor of each other. They wandered for days before returning home, changed forever. They say, she concludes, that each year their faces become a little harder to remember until one day they will be forgotten even on Mondays. By the end of the afternoon, you are no closer to an answer. If anything, the legends have made the confusion more impenetrable, wrapping it in so many layers of meaning that it seems almost deliberate, a ritual in itself. The rain lets up, and the villagers drift back to their homes, their laughter lingering in the smoky air. You are left with the uneasy sense that in Facemount, the truth is just another story, waiting for the right teller and the right night. Perhaps the confusion was born of spite, or necessity, or love, or nothing at all. Perhaps it will last as long as there are villagers willing to tell its tale. As you settle by the fire, you decide that legends are, in their way, a kind of comfort. When you do not know what is real, it helps to have a story ready, especially in a place where once a week, nothing and no one can be trusted to stay the same. If Face Mount's customs are the mortar and its legends the breath, then the village church is its unblinking eye, open every day but seeing most keenly when the world is at its blurriest. Like all things in the village, the church is neither remarkable nor neglected. A squat building of river stone and heavy timbers, its bell tower slightly off kilter, as if resisting the urge to look heavenward for answers that will not come. You observe in your first weeks that the church is a center not of spiritual passion, but of somber habit. Every day at the same hour the bell tolls, once, twice, 3 times, marking time's slow and muddy passage. On weekdays, the villagers trickle in and out for prayers, confessions, or, just as often, shelter from the rain. It is the one place where faces, at least from Monday to Saturday, are greeted with the comfort of recognition. But Sunday is different. On Sunday, the church becomes a stage for the village's most peculiar ritual. You rise early, more out of scholarly curiosity than faith, and follow the flow of villagers to the worn wooden doors. The church fills quickly, pew after pew of men, women, and children sitting just slightly apart, careful not to brush against their neighbors, as if physical contact might shatter whatever fragile certainty remains. Father Mark, who is neither young nor old, nor particularly impressive in stature, steps up to the altar. He does not look at his flock. Instead, he stares above their heads, or sometimes closes his eyes entirely. His voice, dry as old paper, rolls out over the congregation as he recites a sermon nearly unchanged from week to week. The face is but a vessel, he intones. The soul is what matters, not the skin, not the nose, not the eyes. Each Sunday, we are reminded that our trust must rest in the Lord and in the kindness we offer one another, not in outward signs. The villagers bow their heads. Some close their eyes, others fidget, as if suppressing an urge to turn and peek, to reassure themselves that their neighbor is indeed who they think. You notice the children struggle most. One girl, perhaps 6 years old, squints sideways at her mother, only to be gently nudged back to proper posture. Communion is performed with the utmost care. No names are spoken. The bread and wine are passed hand to hand, each recipient nodding silently, an anonymous act of trust. When a hymn is sung, it is always the same tune, a droning melody that seems to hover in the space between joy and lament. The effect is oddly comforting. There is unity in uncertainty, solidarity in shared blindness. After the service, there is no lingering, no chatter in the aisles, no huddles of gossip at the doors. Instead, the congregation disperses quietly, each person making their uncertain way home, eyes downcast, faces obscured by the odd light of Sunday. You are struck by the subtle genius of it. On the one day when no one can be sure of their neighbor, the church asks nothing of the eyes and everything of the heart. Faith in Face Mount, it seems, is not about fire or ecstasy, but about the slow, stubborn act of remaining together despite the fog. During the week, You seek out Father Mark, hoping to glean some ecclesiastical insight into the village's strange affliction. You find him in the vestry, sorting through a battered book of sermons. When you broach the subject, he sighs and gestures for you to sit. The confusion? Ah, yes, he says. It is the Lord's way, or so some believe. Perhaps it began as a punishment, or a test, or merely a quirk of this peculiar valley. It does not matter much in the end. What matters is how we live with it. You press him for more, but his answers are always careful, practiced. I remind the people not to trust the evidence of their eyes, only the steadiness of kindness, the discipline of habit, the willingness to forgive. He shrugs. If we are all strangers on Sunday, we can still be neighbors on Monday. You wonder if he believes his own words, or if he is merely repeating the script handed down by generations of uncertain priests. In your notes, you record both possibilities. One afternoon, you linger after a weekday service, watching as villagers kneel, cross themselves, and light candles for absent loved ones. Father Mark blesses each in turn, always by touch, a hand on the shoulder, a whispered word. There is something intensely human in the gesture, a quiet defiance against the village's weekly amnesia. Yet even the church has its limits. There are no weddings on Sundays, nor funerals, nor baptisms. When the time comes for any rite of passage, it is always scheduled for a weekday when faces are sharp and voices sure. On Sundays, the church is a shelter, nothing more. You ask a few parishioners, cautiously, gently, what they make of it all. An old man shrugs, says he prefers the confusion to the alternative. We are spared the sin of pride, he explains. For how can I boast of my good looks if no one can see them? A woman, her hands stained with dye, says, it is the only time I can forgive my sister or myself. She will not elaborate. You begin to sense that for many, the church's ritual is not only about faith in God, but about faith in each other, a weekly rehearsal in trust, humility, and the endless work of reconciliation. It is not a dramatic faith, no miracles, no revelations, but it is a faith that endures week after blurry week. On your way out, you pause at the door, watching the bell tower as it leans slightly west. The bell itself is silent now, but you can almost hear its echo, a slow, measured call to patience and to the kind of hope that survives confusion. Sunday will come again, and with it the blankness. But Face Mount, you realize, will continue to gather, to pray, and to sing, believing, if only for an hour, that there is a way to see each other truly, even when no face can be recognized. If Face Mount is a place built on custom and resignation, it is also, inevitably, a place where suspicion finds ready soil. Confusion, after all, breeds not only mercy, but mistrust. The more often you find yourself uncertain of your neighbor, the more easily you begin to wonder what might be hidden behind a blurred face or a misremembered name. Your own standing in the village, never fully secure, is the first casualty of this growing unease. You have been the outsider long enough for the novelty to fade, but not long enough to be mistaken for one of their own. Your notebooks, your questions, your odd habit of watching and writing instead of hoeing and trading. These peculiarities, once tolerated, now attract a wary attention. It begins innocuously. One morning, as you enter the market, the usual nods of greeting are less certain, the smiles a shade more brittle. You notice two women exchanging glances. At least you think they are glances. It is difficult to say for sure when you are not sure of their faces. When you approach Cheese Jonas, his fingers twitch nervously around his scales, and his tone is suddenly guarded. "What are you writing there?" he asks, his voice too casual. "Observations, memories," you reply. "Just for myself." He grunts, not convinced. "You have a lot of memories for someone not from here." As the week unfolds, you become aware of silences that were not there before. Conversations pause when you approach. Children run past, but do not stop to ask you to draw them. In the inn, Mistress Marta is as polite as ever, but you catch her watching you when she thinks you are not looking. At first, you assume this is simply the village way, an ebb and flow of attention, a minor consequence of your own oddness. But then you hear the whispers. Late one evening, after most have gone to bed, you descend the stairs to fetch a cup of water. The fire in the common room has burned down to embers. You hear voices, low and urgent, through the half open kitchen door. "Just seems odd, is all," one voice says. "Always scribbling, always asking questions. Maybe it is his fault. Maybe he brought it with him." Another voice, softer. "He is not the first stranger we have had. The confusion was here before him. Still, I do not trust it, or him." You retreat up the stairs, the water forgotten, your mind buzzing. That night, your dreams are a jumble of blurred faces and muffled accusations. You wonder at first if you are imagining things, but the next morning, you find a stone has been placed on your windowsill, a small, ordinary thing, except that in face mount, stones are used to mark boundaries, to warn away spirits or sometimes people. You pick it up and examine it, round, smooth, faintly warm from the sun. There is no message, but the meaning is clear enough. You resolve to keep your distance, to become as invisible as possible. You avoid the market, take your meals alone, walk the long way around the village square. But avoidance, you learn, is suspicious in itself. You sense eyes on your back as you pass, hear footsteps that stop when you turn. Even the children, usually oblivious to adult drama, begin to circle you with wariness. Once, a boy approaches you in the field, only to stop short, as if remembering some warning. He glances at your face, then at the ground, and darts away. Sunday draws near, and the village's usual collective forgetfulness is charged with a new anxiety. You overhear more muttered conversations, snatches of fear dressed up as concern. What if he is a witch's agent? What if it is a curse and he is the carrier? Best not to speak to him on Sunday. Best not to speak to him at all. The ironies are almost comical. In a village where no one can trust a face on Sundays, it is the face of the outsider, always suspect, never quite legible, that becomes a magnet for all the fears that polite silence cannot contain. You are tempted to confront someone, to demand an explanation, but you have learned something of Face Mount's ways. Suspicion, once born, is like mud, best left to dry and crack on its own, lest it be trampled deeper. You take comfort in the ordinary tasks that still remain to you. You chop wood behind the inn, help mend a broken fence, sweep out the chapel, all the while trying to appear useful and unthreatening. You even force yourself to attend a midweek gathering at the church, listening dutifully as Father Mark lectures on humility and the dangers of judgment. He seems to sense your discomfort, offering you an extra slice of bread and a nod of encouragement. But you are not sure if even the priest's blessing is enough to counter the village's vague but growing dread. By Friday, the tension has reached its quiet peak. You are standing by the well when you catch sight of two men. Men you have known for weeks, men whose names are firmly recorded in your notebook, arguing in hushed tones. One glances at you, then looks away, as if burned. You are reminded suddenly that suspicion in Face Mount is a kind of communal ritual as deeply ingrained as the Sunday confusion. If a mystery cannot be solved, it must be blamed. And if it cannot be blamed on a neighbor, it must be blamed on the one who remains outside the circle. That night, you prepare for Sunday with more care than usual. You double check your windows, pack your notebook away, and tie the protective red string around your wrist with extra knots. The village is silent, but the air is thick with the things that have not been said. You lie awake, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old inn, and wonder if suspicion is not, in its own way, as confusing as the loss of faces. You realize you have become the village's mirror, a thing in which everyone sees only what they fear. In Face Mount, you think it is easy to be lost, but it is even easier to become the thing that others wish to lose. As dawn breaks on another Sunday, you wonder, will the village forget you with the same ease that it forgets faces? Or will suspicion linger, a shadow that no amount of confusion can quite erase? In most villages, the word witch is spoken only behind closed doors or else at festivals where it is safely paired with laughter and ale. In Face Mount, the word is neither joked about nor openly condemned. It is simply there, a quiet thread running through the fabric of every Sunday, woven as tightly as suspicion or custom. For weeks, you have heard only hints of a woman at the edge of the woods, of herbs and shadows and secrets, of someone who remembers things the rest would rather forget. It is perhaps inevitable that your own growing unease draws you toward her. After all, outsiders are said to attract one another, and your presence has already become the favored explanation for every unease and disappointment that has flourished in the village's collective mind. The approach to the witch's cottage is less dramatic than the legends suggest. No brambles clutch your ankles, no crows follow you with accusing stares. Instead, you find a narrow footpath winding through birch trees and stunted oaks, the earth damp and sweet underfoot. The cottage itself is almost laughably ordinary, a low roof of moss, a crooked chimney, a garden overgrown with fennel, rue, and wild carrots. If not for the faint, persistent scent of dried lavender and burnt sage, you might pass it by altogether. She is waiting for you, of course. Witches in stories are always waiting, as if visitors are fated to arrive precisely when most troubled. She sits by the open door, spinning wool, her face lost in shadow. You realize, with a small start, that you cannot tell her age. Her hands are strong but thin, her eyes quick but deep set, her hair more silver than black. Her smile, when it comes, is small and sly. You have taken your time, she says, her voice as dry as autumn leaves. I wondered when you would decide to visit. You fumble for a greeting, but she waves you in, motioning to a low stool by the fire. The inside of her cottage is as you might expect. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters. Books and bones jostle for space on the mantelpiece, and a large black cat sleeps on a pile of old cloaks. The fire crackles cheerfully, and for a moment you feel foolish for thinking this woman could be the source of anything more troubling than indigestion. She pours you a cup of something hot and bitter. You sip because it would be rude not to, and because you have the uneasy sense that rudeness would not be wise here. The witch watches you, her gaze unwavering. You are not the first stranger to try to outsmart this place, she says. But you may be the first to keep such careful notes. Let me see them. Startled, you hesitate, but there is no command in her voice, only mild curiosity. You hand over your notebook, its pages filled with sketches, names, questions. She flips through it, nodding occasionally. A good effort, she remarks, but you have missed the point. You bristle a little. Which point is that? The point is not to know who everyone is, or was, or might be. The point is to notice what happens when no one knows. She closes the book and hands it back. You see the confusion as a problem. The villagers see it as protection. I see it as a kind of truth. You are not sure how to respond. Instead, you ask the question that has been gathering in you since your first Sunday. Why does this happen? Why here? She laughs, a short, sharp sound. There are as many reasons as there are stories, and as many stories as there are stones on the road. Some say it was a curse, some a blessing, some a trick played by the valley itself. Perhaps it began with fear, or love, or simple accident. But now it is a choice the village makes, week after week. They live with it because they must, but also because they want to. You look around at the crowded shelves, the curling pages, the dried and crumbling roots. And you? What do you do with it? The witch shrugs. I watch. I listen. Sometimes I remember things for other people when they cannot. Sometimes I help them forget things they would rather not carry. I keep the stories alive, even when the faces change. You sit together in silence for a while, listening to the wind worry at the thatch. Eventually, she speaks again, more softly. You could leave, you know. Some do, but you stay, and that means you are already part of the story. If you want to know the truth, if you want to see clearly, even on Sundays, You must be willing to pay the price. A chill runs through you, though the fire is warm. What price? She does not answer directly. Instead, she asks, do you really want to see what others do not? Or do you wish to belong? Because here, those are never the same thing. Her words unsettle you more than you care to admit. You sip the rest of the bitter drink, grateful for its sharpness. Outside, the light is fading, the world shrinking to the size of the cottage and its two inhabitants. Before you leave, the witch gives you a small pouch of dried herbs. Tie this above your bed, she says. It will not give you answers, but it will help you sleep. You thank her, and she smiles, a smile so familiar, so utterly unreadable, that you wonder if you have seen it on another face, another day, perhaps even in a dream. As you walk back toward the village, your notebook tucked close, you feel the strangeness of face mount more keenly than ever. The witch's cottage disappears behind you as easily as a thought. The trees close ranks. Somewhere far away, a bell rings, calling no one and everyone. You step back onto the muddy road, uncertain whether you have learned anything at all or simply traded one kind of confusion for another. But you sense that your questions are no longer only your own. They belong to the village now, and the village, like the witch, will answer only in its own time and on its own terms. You do not sleep well after your visit to the witch, though the herbs she gave you fill your tiny room with the scent of wild thyme and something darker, something almost metallic. It is not fear that keeps you awake, but a nervous anticipation, a feeling that you have stepped across a boundary only visible in retrospect. The witch's words haunt you. If you want to see clearly, even on Sundays, you must be willing to pay the price. What, you wonder, is the price of seeing in a village built on not seeing? You spend the next days in an uncomfortable limbo. Life in Face Mount resumes its habitual rhythm. Wood is chopped, bread baked, gossip traded in the square. But your encounters feel altered, as if you now carry some invisible marker. Mistress Marta eyes the pouch of herbs above your bed with open suspicion. Careful what you let into your room, she warns, though whether she means herbs or ideas you cannot tell. You try to return to your old routines, observing, questioning, noting down the village's quirks. But your questions now attract even more attention. The villagers sense the change, as animals sense a coming storm. Some avoid you entirely, others approach, only to stop short, as if unsure whether you are the same person you were before your walk in the woods. The witch's advice lingers. Do you really want to see what others do not? She had spoken as if the choice was yours, but you realize that curiosity, once indulged, is a hunger not easily sated. One evening, restless, you walk to the edge of the forest and stare at the path to her cottage. The way is as plain as ever, but you do not enter. The price, you think, is not merely paid at the threshold. It is exacted daily, in small, accumulating increments. Sunday approaches, and you feel the tension mounting within yourself and in the village. A storm breaks the night before, rain beating against the shutters, thunder rolling through the valley. In the fitful hours before dawn, you dream. Faces swirl in the darkness, merging and dissolving. You reach for them, but they slip through your hands like water. When you wake, it is Sunday, and your resolve is both sharper and more fragile than ever before. You decide, at last, to pay the price. You take the pouch of herbs and tie it around your wrist instead of above your bed, a silent declaration of intent. You leave your notebook behind, reasoning that some things must be seen unmediated. When you step outside, the village is wrapped in that peculiar hush, voices lowered, eyes averted, all wary of the coming confusion. You walk the familiar streets, willing yourself to see what is real. At first, it seems nothing has changed. Faces are still indistinct, details smudged and uncertain. People move slowly, calling to one another in careful, generic tones. For a moment, you fear the witch's magic is nothing more than superstition, herbs and riddles, the last refuge of the lonely and the mad. But as the morning wears on, you begin to notice something different. It is not that faces are suddenly clear, but that your own perception has altered. You sense, rather than see, the people you know. The nervous way Cheese Jonas shifts his weight, the rhythm of Mistress Marta's stride, the soft cough of Father Mark as he passes. The details accumulate, not in the eyes or the chin or the color of hair, but in the music of movement, the cadence of breath, the private choreography of habit. You see the villagers not as faces, but as patterns, woven and rewoven each week. You catch sight of yourself in a window. Your own reflection wavers, unsteady as a shadow in water. For a moment, you do not recognize the person you have become, one who trades certainty for knowledge, clarity for a different kind of understanding. As the day deepens, you feel the price begin to manifest. You are not merely different from the others, you are apart from them. While the rest of the village stumbles together in shared confusion, you drift alone at the edge of their world. It is a loneliness both sharper and more intimate than any you have known. You test the limits of your new vision. You approach Mistress Marta, speak her name. She pauses, looking past you, eyes clouded. Do I know you? She asks, uncertain, her voice not hostile but distant, as if you were a memory just out of reach. You try again, with Cheese Jonas, with the blacksmith, with children in the square. Each time, the pattern repeats. They acknowledge your presence but cannot place you. Worse, there is a discomfort in their gaze, a wariness, as if you are something not entirely safe. You realize, with a chill, that in seeking to see the truth of the village, you have rendered yourself invisible to those whose faces you now recognize most clearly. You retreat to the edge of the fields, watching as the villagers enact their Sunday rituals, swapping bread, losing and finding hats, trading laughter and confusion. You see it all, every gesture, every mistake. You see it with a clarity that is almost painful. You are both witness and exile, admitted to a secret that can never again be shared. By dusk, you return to the inn. Mistress Marta is there, setting out supper. She glances at you, offers a vague smile, then passes by as if you were a stranger. The witch's words echo once more. Do you really want to see? You have your answer now, though it brings you little comfort. That night, you write in your notebook long, tangled pages filled with details only you remember. As you finish, you untie the pouch of herbs from your wrist and hang it above your bed, more out of habit than hope. You lie awake, understanding at last why the villagers prefer confusion to certainty and why knowledge in face mount is always purchased at a price. As you drift into uneasy sleep, you realize that you will never quite belong to the village again, not on Sundays, and perhaps not ever. The price of knowledge is, in the end, exactly what the witch promised: the certainty of being alone in a place where everyone is always lost together. When the witch warned you that every truth has a cost, you expected something immediate and dramatic, perhaps a jolt of pain, a vision, a flash of insight so blinding that you would reel and gasp and fall to your knees, conveniently transformed. Instead, the payment is subtle, precise, and devastatingly ordinary. You become, over the next days and weeks, an expert in loss. At first, it is the faces. On Sunday, you see with peculiar clarity, so much so that the confusion that binds the villagers seems almost like a performance, a pantomime you can no longer join. You recognize everyone: the curve of Mistress Marta's jaw as she scolds a child, the frown lines on Cheese Jonas's brow as he bargains at the market, the lopsided smile of the blacksmith when he thinks no one is watching. You know them all, even as they do not know you. But this clarity comes at a cost, and it is not only your own loneliness. By Monday, you realize that something has shifted in the village's eyes as well. Their greetings to you are hesitant, polite, but formal, as if you are a guest who has overstayed, a presence to be managed and then quietly forgotten. The children, who once begged for drawings and stories, now glance at you with a nervous wariness, their play veering around you as if you are an unseen obstacle. You keep a tally in your notebook, at first as an experiment. The number of nods, the frequency of hellos, the length of eye contact. By the end of the week, you see a pattern. Every Sunday, you gain some new, ineffable understanding of the village, and every Monday, you lose another small piece of your welcome. The lines of hospitality grow fainter, the warmth recedes, replaced by a kind of courteous distance. You test your theory, perhaps foolishly, by seeking out the witch. Her cottage seems even farther from the village than before, the footpath more tangled and shadowed. She answers your knock with a wry smile, as if expecting you. You see it now, do you? She says, pouring 2 cups of bitter tea. I do, you reply, trying not to sound resentful, but I am not sure I wanted to. She shrugs, stirring her tea. Everyone who asks for knowledge believes it will bring them closer to the truth, closer to others. They never realize how often the truth is a dividing line. What you see now, you cannot unsee. You will always be on the wrong side of that line. You set your cup down. How do you live with it? The witch leans back, her eyes distant. I do not try to belong, not anymore. My part is to remember. Yours, I think, is to witness. You can leave, you know. Some do. Some stay and become stories themselves. It is a curious comfort, bleak perhaps, but honest. You thank her and return to the village, feeling more observer than participant. You take longer walks. You watch the villagers from a distance as they enact the small rituals of their lives, mending fences, gathering eggs, washing clothes in the cold stream. Their conversations swirl around you, sometimes including you, more often not. You are addressed but not expected, seen but not quite present. The clarity you have gained makes every Sunday both sharper and more painful. You become, in a sense, the village's only reliable witness. You can list every mistake and every kindness. The time the miller's wife embraced the wrong child, the way the baker comforted a woman whose grief he could not name, the quiet moments when neighbors helped each other, uncertain of who they were, helping but certain that help was needed. Each act, stripped of identity, becomes more poignant. Compassion here is not transactional, it is a habit, a muscle that flexes regardless of who benefits. You wonder if this is the village's true strength, not the ability to recognize, but the ability to care even in confusion. You write about this in your notebook, filling pages with observations, trying to capture the shape of kindness as it drifts untethered from certainty. But with every note, you sense yourself drifting further from the community you have so carefully cataloged. The villagers, sensing your difference even if they cannot name it, place you gently at arm's length. At meals, there is always a space at the end of the table for you. At gatherings, your stories are politely listened to and then forgotten. You have become a part of the village's furniture, always present, rarely remembered. One Sunday, you attempt an experiment. You greet each villager by name, offer details about their families, their work, their pets. Each time, you are met with blankness, polite confusion, or even a hint of alarm. On Monday, those same people avoid your eyes. It is as if your knowledge is an intrusion, a disruption to the gentle order of forgetting that the village depends on. You understand now what the witch meant by the price. You have not simply lost the confusion of Sundays. You have lost your place among those who depend on it. Each gain of knowledge brings with it a parallel loss of intimacy, a closing of doors that once stood ajar. You are not shunned, not quite. Instead, you are slowly and carefully set aside, a necessary outsider, a chronicler, not a neighbor. And yet, you cannot help but watch. You cannot help but see. On Sundays, you are more awake than ever, a solitary figure moving among those who, for a few hours, are free from the burden of recognition. You record what you see, each detail another brick in the wall between you and the life you once hoped to share. The knowledge is yours, irrevocably, the loss too. At the end of one such Sunday, as the sun sets over Face Mount and the villagers gather in their homes, you find yourself standing at the edge of the square, watching the sky fade from gold to gray. You wonder if anyone notices your absence, or if, by now, you have become just another part of the village's landscape, unremarked, necessary, and forever on the edge of belonging. You once believed that Face Mount's greatest secret was its collective confusion, that the Sunday blindness was the full extent of the village's mysteries. Yet it is only after you become the village's reliable outsider, unmissable but half unseen, that you begin to notice subtler signs of secrecy. There are codes here that run deeper than forgetting, quiet arrangements that organize the village, even when its eyes are closed. It begins with a misstep. You are walking the muddy lane late on a Wednesday evening, notebook in hand, when you spot three figures by the old granary. The hour is too late for work and too early for sleep. You pause, as one does in Face Mount, at the respectful distance of someone who has no business with strangers. Yet, even at a distance, you recognize the pattern, the way they stand, the cautious glance over the shoulder, the hurried exchange of something too small to see. You mean to pass quietly, but your foot slips in the mud. The noise, small but sharp, draws all three faces toward you. You see them hesitate, then the tallest of the three steps forward. It is the miller's daughter, or perhaps the tanner's son. On Wednesdays, the difference is clear, but even now your certainty falters. Evening, the figure says, too level, too casual. You are out late. You nod, holding up your notebook as explanation, the universal passport of the harmless observer. Just writing, you say. The moon's good for it. A silence hangs. Then one of the others, face in shadow, gives a single, curt nod, and the trio slips away, vanishing between sheds and hedges as neatly as foxes. You watch them go, heart beating faster than the moment seems to deserve. It would be easy to dismiss this as nothing, a late night chat, a passing exchange. But you are no longer a stranger to the ways of subtle things. Over the next weeks, you begin to look for patterns, and slowly, reluctantly, the village reveals its second set of rules. There is a group, small, fluid, half acknowledged and half denied, whose purpose is to make sense of what sense cannot be made. They do not call themselves a society. Such drama would be laughable in a place so determined to avoid spectacle. But you learn to spot their signals: a chalk mark under a windowsill, a piece of blue cloth tied to a door latch, a stone left on a step, different from the warning stone once placed on your own. At the market, you watch as the members meet by chance, or so it seems. The baker's assistant slips a note into the basket of the priest's wife. The shepherd's son and the old smith exchange 3 coins, far too deliberately, to be a purchase. Each act is small, plausible, deniable, but seen with your new clarity, the connections emerge. You wonder at first what their aim might be. Are they trying to break the Sunday spell, to outsmart it as you once tried? Or are they merely seeking comfort in the knowledge that others share their unease? You have learned the price of knowing, but you are still drawn to those who seem to ask the same questions. One night you find an invitation, if such a thing can be called an invitation, pinned under your door. It is nothing more than a slip of paper blank except for a single wavering line, like the horizon on a stormy sea. You recognize it from your observations, a sign that a meeting will take place that night at the abandoned mill. You go, of course. Curiosity, once indulged, becomes a kind of obligation. The mill is cold and smells of dust and ancient grain. 6 figures stand in the gloom, their faces caught between lamplight and shadow. There are no names exchanged, no explanations offered. The leader, a woman whose hands are stained with dye, begins. We meet to share what we remember, to keep record, to compare notes. You realize, with a mix of relief and regret, that you are not alone in your exile. These are the ones who have paid the price in one way or another. Some have learned to see as you have. Others remember things they should have forgotten or feel the confusion less acutely than the rest. All bear the same signs of separation, a gentleness edged with sorrow, an intimacy that refuses to become friendship. The meeting proceeds in whispers. Each shares something from the previous Sunday, a memory, a mistake, a kindness received or given. The baker's assistant confesses to guiding a confused neighbor home, despite knowing she would not be recognized. The priest's wife admits to tying ribbons in her daughter's hair each Saturday, hoping it might help her find her way back. The dye-stained woman tells of a dream in which all faces blurred but one, her own, reflected endlessly in the eyes of strangers. You share, too, the loneliness of seeing, the ache of knowing. There are nods of understanding, murmurs of agreement. Here, at last, is a society of sorts, not of solutions, but of survivors. There is no plan, no grand scheme to defeat the confusion. There are only small strategies, notes hidden under stones, ribbons tied to fence posts, old songs hummed in the dark. It is not resistance exactly, nor acceptance. It is something in between, a way to live with the unbearable weight of memory and the still heavier burden of being different. Before you leave, the dye-stained woman presses a hand to your arm. If you ever need to forget, come to us. We can help in small ways. You nod, though you are not sure you believe her. Forgetting, for you, feels as distant as belonging. You leave the mill at dawn, the air sharp and clean. The village is waking. Milk pails clatter, windows open, the smell of baking bread drifts down the lane. Life in Facemount, as ever, resumes its endless loop. But you carry the knowledge of the secret society with you now, a comfort and a burden. You are not alone, not entirely, but you are not restored to the village either. You are part of a hidden fellowship of rememberers, the ones who see and, seeing, pay for it. The village remains the same, but beneath the surface, there are always others watching, others keeping the thread of memory alive, quietly daring to see in a world built for forgetting, having found, or perhaps been found by, the village's secret society of rememberers. You discover that the Sunday confusion is not, as you once believed, an isolated absurdity. It is instead the living tip of an ancient root, woven so deeply into the earth and history of Facemount that tugging on it feels less like solving a riddle and more like threatening the integrity of the ground beneath your feet. The others in the society, who still refuse to call themselves anything so dramatic, are cautious at first. There are, after all, dangers in asking too many questions, as well as a strange etiquette to collective amnesia. Those who pry too hard are gently ignored. Those who persist are left to wander alone. But you have paid your price and earned your discomfort. So one night they decide you may as well be shown what little they have pieced together. The meeting takes place not at the abandoned mill, but in the priest's own study, under the benevolent gaze of saints whose names no one quite remembers. A kettle steams on the stove. The air is thick with the scent of old vellum, damp wool, and a kind of anxious hope. Father Mark, who is less leader than caretaker, brings out the society's collective hoard, a box of papers, scraps, buttons, a chipped comb, a faded scrap of blue ribbon, a bundle of pressed flowers, the artifacts of remembrance. You and the others pore over these objects by candlelight. Each piece is a clue, though what it points to, no one agrees. The dye-stained woman has a particular theory, which she shares with the kind of zeal reserved for those who know their audience is too polite to contradict. She believes the Sunday confusion is a legacy of older times, before the church, before even the first stone of Facemount was set. Look at the carvings on the old standing stones, she insists, and the pattern of the midsummer bonfires. This valley was once a place of forgetting, a refuge, perhaps, for those fleeing something worse. You have heard this theory before, but now you hear it with new ears. The others add their fragments. Tales of travelers who once lost their way here and decided never to leave. Stories of a festival where all wore masks for days. A half remembered account of a woman who, centuries ago, claimed to speak to the spirits of the land and was both revered and reviled for it. The witch's lineage, someone ventures, might stretch back to those days. You wonder if the confusion is a curse or a pact, a punishment or a protection. Each suggestion finds both supporters and doubters. The priest, ever pragmatic, points out that the written records of Facemount are patchy at best. Parish ledgers with whole years missing, accounts of births and deaths that become strangely vague each time a Sunday falls on a holy day. It is as if history itself blurs at the edges, refusing to be pinned down. Determined to see for yourself, you propose an expedition to search out the village's oldest places, to read the illegible gravestones, to copy the carvings on the standing stones that dot the fields to the north. Your companions agree, some out of curiosity, some out of boredom, and a few out of a stubborn hope that answers might lighten the burden of knowing. The first site is the old burial ground, just beyond the stream. It is a place the villagers avoid, except in necessity, and even then only on bright days. The gravestones are worn to nubs, their inscriptions melted by rain and time. Still, you make rubbings, careful not to disturb the moss and lichen. A few names emerge, always repeated, as if families once circled in on themselves until the only difference between them was the order of the syllables. From there, you walk to the largest of the standing stones, a crooked monolith half swallowed by nettles. The carvings are older than the alphabet, all spirals and interlocking lines, no faces or figures. The dye stained woman traces a spiral with her finger, whispering, a map, perhaps, or a warning. Something to remind us that what we lose, we sometimes choose to lose. You sketch the markings in your notebook, though you doubt anyone alive could read them. As you work, you catch the priest watching you, his face lined with concern. Sometimes, he murmurs, the search for origins is an attempt to avoid the present. Perhaps what matters is not where the confusion came from, but what it has made of us. You wonder if he is right. Still, the investigation goes on. In the church's cellar, you find a fragment of a parchment, illegible, but for a phrase that makes the hair rise on your arms. Memory is a garment worn thin by use. You copy it down, uncertain whether it is a warning or a comfort. As the days pass, the society grows bolder. You interview the oldest villagers, whose memories flicker between clarity and fog. Old Mother Lyra remembers a time when the confusion was stronger, or perhaps only less discussed. Another elder swears there was a year when the confusion did not come at all, and the village was beset by quarrels and heartbreak until the custom returned. You ask the witch too, though her answers are as cryptic as ever. Origins are like rivers, she says. Follow one, and you will find another feeding into it. In the end, you are left with the sea, and that is too much water for anyone to hold. Despite the ambiguity, something shifts in you and your companions. The investigation does not dissolve the confusion, but it reframes it. No longer just a weekly nuisance or a private sorrow, but a legacy, a choice, a kind of heritage. The confusion is a story the village tells about itself, one that you have now helped to write. As Sunday approaches, you gather in the church for one last meeting. The box of artifacts is packed away. Each member of your quiet fellowship returns to their routine, their place in the pattern of confusion and memory. You return to your room at the inn, uncertain whether you have found answers or merely better questions. On Sunday morning, you wake as always to the bell, the hush, the village's collective forgetting. But this time, you feel a new kinship with the others who keep watch, who search for meaning in the shifting fog. The origins of Face Mount's strangeness remain just out of reach, like a half remembered dream. But you understand now that seeking is itself a form of belonging, even for those who never truly find what they are looking for. In every quest for origin, there comes a moment, equal parts revelation and disappointment, when the answers prove less illuminating than the questions themselves. After weeks of searching through stones and stories, you awaken one Sunday morning with the vague feeling that you are on the brink of understanding something important about Face Mount's strange weekly affliction. The Society of Rememberers is restless too. That week's meeting is longer than usual. The dye-stained woman argues that they are close to a breakthrough. The priest, more reserved, warns against pride and certainty. You, caught somewhere in between, have started to notice a tension running through your thoughts like a hidden thread. What would it mean for the village if the confusion ended? Who or what might be protected by forgetting? And perhaps more troubling, would you, now so changed, even want the spell broken? The truth, when it finally emerges, does not come with thunder or spectacle. Instead, it is assembled piece by piece in the odd, anticlimactic way of all real knowledge. It begins with an observation so obvious that it has gone unnoticed for years. On Sundays, even as faces blur and names dissolve, certain things do not change. The order in which bread is passed at the table, the familiar ways hands find each other in greeting, the old dog who limps down the same path. Patterns persist, even when recognition falters. The village does not collapse into chaos. Instead, it seems almost more harmonious, as if everyone is freed from the weight of memory and the sharp edges of resentment. This is the first layer of the Sunday truth. The confusion, far from being a simple curse, is also a shield, a way to reset old quarrels and prevent the slow accretion of grievances that can sour a small place into bitterness. Arguments that flare on Saturday are quietly buried by Sunday, and by Monday it is easier to begin again with only the faintest echo of what was once so important. You see it in the way Mistress Marta and Cheese Jonas share a smile after a week of bickering, in the forgiving tone of the blacksmith when a child drops a tool, in the gentle, ritual mistakes that seem designed to offer everyone a chance to start over. But there is a second, darker layer. During your investigation, you stumble upon an old, rarely used path along the riverbank. There you find a stone you have never noticed before. Not a standing stone, but a marker carved with the faintest of symbols, a face with the eyes rubbed out. You call the society together and, with hands shaking a little, clear away the moss. The priest reads aloud the fragment of inscription: that which cannot be faced must not be named. That which must not be named will not be remembered. A chill settles over your group. The dye-stained woman shivers. A ward, she says, not just for the living, for something older. In the days that follow, you piece together what you can from folklore, from the witch's elliptical remarks, and from your own observations. The confusion, it seems, was not merely a way to avoid gossip or heal old wounds. It began as a communal protection, a magic or pact, depending on one's theology, to keep the village safe from something that once stalked its boundaries, a presence or force that preyed on recognition itself. The society debates what exactly this means. Was there once a shapeshifter among the villagers? A spirit that slipped in and out of faces, growing stronger the more it was known and named? Or was it something subtler, a fear so great that the only defense was collective forgetting? No one knows, not really. But in your heart, you sense the truth is less about monsters and more about the long, slow work of survival. The confusion is a living monument to an old fear, calcified into habit, made soft by time, until it is just another Sunday custom. And now perhaps the original danger, whatever it was, has passed, replaced by something gentler but no less necessary, the chance for mercy, the relief of letting go. For the first time, you feel something like forgiveness rising in you for the village and for yourself. You no longer see the Sunday confusion only as exile, but as a kind of grace, a weekly invitation to loosen the grip of certainty, to live with others not as the sum of their histories and failings, but as fellow travelers through the fog. There is a sense of release in the air that week, a hush that is not quite sadness. In the marketplace, people make their mistakes more openly, even playfully. You hear laughter where before there might have been suspicion, and the children, emboldened, invent new games with rules they change by the hour. You walk the village on Sunday afternoon, letting yourself drift into the pattern, accepting the bread handed to you, passing the bucket at the well, offering a wordless nod to the old man sitting by the forge. For once, you do not try to fix anyone in your memory. You do not try to anchor yourself with knowledge. You let the confusion move through you like a river, washing away the debris of the week. That night, you attend the society's meeting, and for the first time, there is no agenda. Instead, you all sit in silence, each holding a piece of the old world and the new, feeling the boundary between knowing and not knowing grow blessedly thin. You leave the meeting lighter, your notebook unopened in your pocket. The truth, you realize, is not an end to confusion, but a new way of living with it. The spell is not there to be broken, but to be shared. The village is safe, not because it remembers, but because every week it allows itself to forget. As the bells ring in the new day, you understand what it means to be part of Face Mount at last, not by mastering its secrets, but by becoming one more gentle thread in the tapestry of its forgetting. Understanding, you quickly discover, is not the same as resolution. Knowledge does not sweep away uncertainty, nor does the truth, such as it is, absolve you from the responsibility of choice. In Face Mount, where every Sunday is a rehearsal for letting go, you find yourself facing the peculiar, weighty question of what to do with what you now know. The society, your unlikely fellowship of rememberers, is divided. Some, buoyed by discovery, urge action. Perhaps it is time to tell the village what you have learned, to try to break or lift or reshape the Sunday spell. The dye-stained woman, in particular, is relentless. It is old magic, she argues, born of old fear. If the danger is gone, why must we pay its price? We are grown now, not children hiding from monsters under the bed. Let us be free. Others are wary. Father Mark, gentle but firm, cautions humility. We do not know that the danger is truly gone, he says, eyes flickering with memories he does not share. Even if it is, this confusion has become a part of who we are. What would you give in exchange for certainty? And what would you lose? You find yourself pulled between these poles, longing for clarity, but haunted by the suspicion that certainty carries its own costs. In the days that follow, you begin to observe the villagers not only for their actions, but for the quiet benefits of their Sunday forgetfulness. On Monday, you watch Mistress Marta and Cheese Jonas share coffee after a week of petty quarrels, both visibly relieved to let old grudges dissolve into Sunday mist. On Wednesday, you see the miller's boy forgive a friend for a harsh word spoken in haste, as if the memory has lost its sting. The children play without the burden of last week's pecking orders or small betrayals. Even you, for all your exile, sense a lightning in the air. But there are costs, too. You listen as the society's members speak of losses that never heal. The baker's assistant, who, every Sunday, forgets the face of the brother he lost to fever, forced to mourn again and again. The priest's wife, who ties ribbons in her daughter's hair, not just for comfort, but out of a desperate hope that one day her child will remember her even when names and faces blur. And what of your own loneliness? You who see but are not seen, who remember but are not remembered. Is this clarity a blessing or simply a different kind of isolation? The village, meanwhile, carries on. For most, Sunday is neither curse nor gift, but simply the way things are. A custom, a rhythm, a constraint so old it feels like nature. The prospect of change, even for the better, is greeted with the same resignation as bad weather or poor harvests. It may come or it may not. In the meantime, there is work to be done. You spend your evenings walking the boundaries of Face Mount, pausing by the standing stones, listening to the river's slow song. You weigh the arguments in your mind, the thrill of discovery, the potential for healing, the terror of unforeseen consequences. If the confusion truly began as a shield against some ancient peril, who can say that peril will not return? If it was invented to prevent grudges from festering, what old wounds might open if the forgetting ceases? One night, you sit with the witch in her mossy cottage, the fire throwing long shadows on the walls. Every spell is a door, she says, spinning her thread, and every door, once opened, lets in not only light, but drafts, and sometimes thieves. What you change, you must be willing to live with forever. You confess your uncertainty, your longing for community, and your fear of unintended harm. The witch listens, neither comforting nor judging. If you want the village to choose, then you must be honest about the price. That is the only magic I trust. In the days that follow, you consult the other members of the society. Some confess to wishing the confusion would end, if only for a week, to taste what life could be like if everyone saw and remembered, even at the risk of pain. Others admit they would rather the forgetting continue, sparing themselves and others from old griefs, new enmities. You draft a letter, half manifesto, half confession, describing what you have found, what you suspect, and what you cannot know. You share it first with the society, then with Father Mark, who reads it in silence and nods gravely. If you bring this to the village, he says, do so gently. There are truths that weigh more than any stone. The decision, when it comes, is collective. The society will present the facts to the village at the next full moon when all are gathered for the harvest feast. The days leading up to the meeting are charged with anxiety. Some prepare speeches, others practice silence. You walk the lanes, feeling the weight of possibility settle on your shoulders. On the night of the feast, the village gathers in the square, torches burning, the air thick with the scent of roasting grain and apples. The society stands together, a half visible thread at the edge of the crowd. When Father Mark steps forward and calls for quiet, the murmurs die away. He speaks plainly, explaining what has been found, what might be changed, and what risks and freedoms are at stake. Faces, usually so familiar, are made strange by firelight and uncertainty. Some villagers listen with hope, some with fear, a few with blank resignation. When your turn comes, you share what you have seen, the kindness, the pain, the possibilities. You do not tell them what to choose. As the torches burn low, the villagers talk long into the night. Some weep, some argue, some laugh with a kind of wild relief. By dawn, there is no consensus, but there is a sense that something essential has been shifted. The weight of history has been named, and the question, once buried, is now alive. You return to your room, exhausted. The consequences of knowledge are not finality, but responsibility, a burden you share now with the others. There is no going back, but there is a kind of peace in the uncertainty. You have weighed the options. The village will decide in its own time. For now, the Sunday confusion remains, but you sense the spell is lighter, less absolute. Perhaps the truest magic is not in forgetting, nor in remembering, but in the freedom to choose together in the gentle gray space between knowledge and mercy. Change in face mount is as slow and stubborn as the stones themselves. Weeks pass after the harvest feast, and though life seems to return to its old routines, you sense a subtle trembling beneath the surface, as if the earth itself is waiting for some decision to be made. For the first time since you arrived, the village is not merely drifting through its days, but is, in its quiet, shuffling way, preparing for something. The Society of Rememberers meets more frequently now, and the meetings are charged with anticipation and worry. The dye-stained woman is impatient. "We cannot wait forever," she says, twisting her fingers in her lap. Others are less certain. Some worry aloud about what might be lost if the spell is undone. The priest is somber, his prayers longer, his eyes searching the faces around him as if trying to memorize each one for a future he cannot quite imagine. It is the witch who finally suggests a path forward in her typical roundabout way. "You are thinking too much like scholars," she says one evening, as rain drums the thatch above her cottage. "Facemount is a place of ritual, not debate. If you want to test the bounds of forgetting, then you must do it together, not as a secret, not as a society, but as a village. There must be a ritual, something old and new, something that admits doubt as well as hope." This idea takes hold. Over the next week, plans are whispered from door to door, quietly and carefully. The villagers agree, with varying degrees of enthusiasm and dread, to try something different. On the last Sunday before winter, the turning of the year, the time when the valley's fog is thickest, The village will gather for a ritual on the ancient hill just beyond the northern fields, where the standing stones watch and wait. The preparations are strange, a blend of old habits and new intentions. No one is quite sure what the ritual should be, so everyone contributes something. Bread is baked and left unsliced. Ribbons are tied to every gatepost. Children are instructed to collect smooth stones and place them in a circle on the hill. The priest writes a new prayer, full of ambiguous blessings, and the witch brews a tea that is both calming and bitter. The dye-stained woman sews together a patchwork cloth, stitched with scraps from every household, a history of sorts in thread. On the chosen morning, the village gathers at dawn. The fog is so thick that the world feels reduced to only what can be touched and heard. Faces, as always on Sunday, swim in and out of recognition, but there is a new tension in the way the villagers hold hands, the way they glance at each other as if trying, for once, to see through the blur. The ritual itself is simple and awkward. No magic words, no secret knowledge, just the deliberate act of being present together in confusion. The patchwork cloth is laid on the ground. Each villager steps forward to place a hand on it, speaking their name, not for others, but for themselves. The children add their stones to the circle, building a cairn that wobbles precariously but does not fall. The priest speaks the new prayer, voice shaking but strong. May what we remember strengthen us. May what we forget release us. May we know each other, not by face or name, but by kindness and need. If there is a spell, let it be this: to choose together what we hold and what we let go. The witch scatters herbs in the air, their scent sharp and unfamiliar. The dye-stained woman hums an old song, and soon others join, the melody wavering and strange, a kind of music only this village could make. You, standing at the edge of the circle, feel both deeply included and hopelessly apart. You place your own hand on the cloth, say your name, and hope it will be remembered, even if only for a moment. As the sun rises, the fog begins to lift, not all at once, but in slow, shivering curls. The villagers look at each other, some weeping, some laughing nervously. A hush falls, thick as the mist. For a moment, no one speaks. Then a child, bold as children are, runs to embrace a woman who might be her mother, and the spell, whatever it was, seems to break and mend at the same time. That afternoon, the village returns to its daily business. The confusion, strangely, does not immediately vanish, nor does it intensify. Instead, there is a gentle slackening, a sense that the ritual, imperfect as it was, has loosened something at the core of the village's long habit of forgetting. You notice small changes in the days that follow. People try a little harder to see each other. Old feuds are discussed, not avoided. There is laughter, but it is tinged with relief and sadness. The society of rememberers finds itself less necessary. Its meetings become social, the urgent work of secrecy replaced by the simple comfort of shared bread and stories. You visit the witch once more to thank her. She shrugs, accepting your gratitude as if it is the weather, pleasant, but not her doing. Ritual is a kind of spell, she says, but the best spells are made from hope and doubt together. Do not be surprised if the forgetting comes back, or if it changes. Spells, like people, are always unfinished. You return to the inn that night and see Mistress Marta's face in the firelight. She looks at you for a long moment, then nods, as if seeing you for the first time. It is a good thing you stayed, she says. You realize, finally, that belonging in Facemount was never a matter of being remembered perfectly. It was always about being present for the choosing, for the rituals of hope and the work of doubt. In the end, what matters is not whether the confusion persists, but that the village chose, together, to shape its own forgetting. Outside, the fog lingers, but it is thinner now. You sit by the window, watching it curl and fade, and understand that the final ritual was never about ending the spell. It was about learning how to live with it, open eyed, together, and unafraid. Monday arrives with a hesitant dawn, as if the sun itself is uncertain how it ought to rise after the village's great experiment. The air feels lighter, as though some ancient pressure has been relieved, but the village of Facemount is not in a hurry to declare itself changed. In truth, the shift is slow and curious, as all true changes are, and for several days you find yourself watching the villagers with the wary interest of a naturalist studying a species after an unusual migration. At first, there is an odd quiet. On the Monday after the ritual, faces are sharp and distinct, but conversation is cautious, testing, as if the villagers expect the confusion to reassert itself at any moment. People greet each other a little awkwardly, some with too much enthusiasm, some with the nervousness of actors uncertain of their lines. A few seem disappointed to find that nothing grand has happened, while others seem relieved that the world, after all, has not ended in fire or silence. Yet, beneath the surface, something has changed. By Tuesday, there is a subtle boldness. Neighbors who once avoided old disputes begin, tentatively, to talk about them. Children, sensing the air of possibility, invent games that involve both remembering and forgetting, each round of play and improvisation on the village's oldest theme. Even the priest, who was once the guardian of Sunday's humility, now walks through the square with a lighter step, pausing to ask after families, to laugh, to listen. But the most peculiar transformation is saved, as always, for the next Sunday. You wake to find the village not restored to its old order, nor given over entirely to clarity. Instead, it is as if the spell or custom or whatever held Facemount in its gentle confusion has returned in altered form. This Sunday, when you walk the muddy lanes, you notice that faces are neither wholly blurred nor fully revealed. Instead, each villager sees something of themselves in every other. Mistress Marta's sharp chip chin is echoed in the baker's profile. Cheese Jonas's nervous smile glimmers, briefly, on the blacksmith's face. Even the children seem to carry each other's laughter and frowns. It is as if, for this day, the boundaries of self and the other have grown porous, not erased, but gently redrawn. The effect is unsettling at first. Conversations are filled with double takes and nervous laughter. People apologize for mistakes that have not yet happened. The child who calls for her mother finds half the village answering, and everyone laughs at the confusion, but there is no embarrassment, only a sense of shared strangeness. You discover, to your surprise, that you are not immune. When you catch your own reflection in a window, you see not only your own eyes, but flashes of those you have known since coming here. Marta's kindness, the witch's sly humor, the dye stained woman's stubborn courage. The village has become a hall of living mirrors, each person carrying fragments of everyone else. At first, some find this unnerving. The old quarrels that might have flared in the past now dissolve into mutual confusion. If you see yourself in your adversary's face, it is harder to keep your anger sharp. The blacksmith, once famous for holding grudges, is seen shaking hands with Cheese Jonas before the church service, both men a little baffled but content. The priest's sermon this Sunday is different too. He speaks of seeing the image of oneself in every neighbor, of the difficulty and necessity of forgiveness, of how mercy grows easier when the boundary between I and thou becomes uncertain. Perhaps, he says, the true magic of face mount was never forgetting, nor even remembering, but learning how to see the same soul behind many faces. The ritual meal that follows is a gently comic affair. People swap plates, trade places, laugh when the wrong cup is picked up or the wrong hand is shaken. No one seems eager to correct mistakes. By the end of the day, the entire village is in on the joke, and the laughter is deeper, touched by a new tenderness. Even the witch attends, sitting quietly at the edge, her smile enigmatic. Over the following weeks, the new order of things settles in. The Sunday strangeness is neither wholly broken nor fully restored. Instead, it has changed shape. The confusion is now creative, a weekly reminder that identity is never fixed, that each person is, for a day, a part of every other. Children make games of guessing who they resemble that day, and adults find themselves reconsidering old assumptions, caught off guard by moments of sudden kinship. You, the perennial outsider, find your role evolving. For the first time, you are not merely the observer, but also the observed, a face among faces, both distinct and blended. When the villagers look at you, you see curiosity, recognition, even affection. You are no longer a stranger, nor quite a chronicler. Instead, you are one more part of the experiment, both changed and changing. The society of rememberers fades gently into the background. Its work, for now, is done. Meetings become rare, then unnecessary. The priest, the dye stained woman, the others, each returns to their ordinary lives, changed in small, unspoken ways. Even the witch seems content to let the mystery rest, for now. On a quiet Sunday evening, you walk the lanes of Face Mount as dusk settles over the fields. The village is bathed in a gentle twilight, faces flickering in the windows, laughter drifting over the hedges. For the first time since your arrival, You feel not that you belong to Facemount, but that Facemount belongs, in some way, to you. Its confusion is now a choice, a shared inheritance, a living tradition that holds room for change. As you reach the square, a group of children pulls you into their game. For a moment, you see your own smile mirrored on a dozen faces, and you laugh, not with the relief of a puzzle solved, but with the joy of being, at last, part of the village's endless, unfinished story. By now, you know that endings in Facemount are rarely neat. Stories here unravel like old sweaters, slowly, comfortably, with more loose threads than you started with. You have watched the village change, or perhaps simply watched yourself change in relation to it, and this quiet, ongoing transformation is its own sort of conclusion. The question is not whether the confusion will return, or whether perfect clarity will ever reign, but whether the village has finally learned to live with its peculiar form of mercy. Your days settle into a new, gentle rhythm. The inn, once a place of wary hospitality, now feels like home. Mistress Marta's voice is familiar in the mornings, and sometimes, though never on Sundays, you find her looking at you as if she has always known your face, even when she could not name it. The children no longer avoid you. Their games, which once ran around you like a boulder in a stream, now fold you into the current. You continue to keep your notebook, but it fills more slowly. The urge to record every detail has faded, replaced by a patient curiosity. Your entries are often small observations. Jonas laughing with the priest, almost dropped the bread, or the patchwork cloth is still on the hill, now faded, but the children added new stones. There are days when you write nothing at all, content to let the village's stories weave themselves without your intervention. Sundays remain unpredictable, but not troubling. Some weeks, the old confusion returns for a few hours, faces blurring, names slipping, laughter rising from the shared absurdity. On other Sundays, the new magic persists. Each person glimpses echoes of themselves in every other, a kaleidoscope of identity that no one finds threatening anymore. It is, you decide, neither a curse nor a blessing. It is simply what happens here, a communal pause that allows the week to reset, like a book closed and reopened to a different chapter. The villagers have become experts at navigating this strangeness. They meet mistakes with gentle correction or good humored acceptance. If a quarrel bubbles up, it is allowed to simmer for a day, knowing that Sunday will take the edge off, will blur the lines, and remind everyone that being right is not nearly as important as being together. Weddings are now scheduled with the knowledge that faces may shift, that vows are best made with eyes closed or hands held tightly. Funerals, when they occur, are attended by the whole village, each mourner certain for a few hours that the loss is shared, not individual. Father Mark still preaches on Sundays, but his sermons have become parables of uncertainty, tales of kings who forgot their crowns, of farmers who mistook wolves for sheep and sheep for wolves, of children who wandered into forests and returned as strangers. His message is always the same in the end. Mercy and doubt are twins. Do not exile one to make room for the other. The witch remains in her cottage at the edge of the wood, still the keeper of remedies, riddles, and occasional gossip. She and you share tea sometimes, speaking not of curses or spells, but of recipes, weather, and the slow work of learning to accept what cannot be explained. She tells you, on one autumn afternoon, you would have made a poor magician, far too interested in what comes after the trick, but you are a fine villager for all that. The society of rememberers disperses, its need faded. Sometimes you cross paths with the dye stained woman who waves from her garden and asks after your health. The secret signs and coded meetings have given way to casual conversations. The priest's wife keeps tying ribbons in her daughter's hair, but now it is a game, a tradition that persists not because it is needed, but because it brings joy. The patchwork cloth on the hill endures through the winter. Come spring, the children mend it with new scraps, bright colors sewn alongside the faded ones. It is, in its way, a monument, not to the end of confusion, but to its acceptance, to the choice Facemount made to live with ambiguity rather than try to banish it. One evening, as dusk settles in, you sit by your window and watch the villagers gather in the square. They share food, laughter, stories. The confusion may return, clarity may one day vanish altogether, but it no longer frightens anyone. The village has made peace with its history and its spell, with what must be forgotten and what can be remembered. You consider, with a wry smile, how much time you spent searching for the secret logic of Facemount. The great irony, of course, is that the answer was always simple. You cannot outwit confusion with more confusion, nor impose clarity on people who have chosen, together, a gentler sort of forgetting. Mercy, in Facemount, is not granted by memory, but by the willingness to start over, again and again, face to face, however many faces that may mean. The final entry in your notebook is brief. You write, Sunday, and the village is at peace. I see myself in them. I think they see themselves in me. It is enough. As you close the notebook and look out at the flickering lights, you find yourself comforted by the village's patient, boring, miraculous history. A story best told when one is almost asleep, the details gently blurring, the ending not quite in focus, which is in Facemount the only way to end a story at all.